wants you to rally round and shove her into your show, and generally keep the home fires burning, and so forth. How do we go?" Reggie beamed with relief. He felt just as he had felt on that other occasion, at the moments when a taxicab had rolled up and enabled him to hide his spatless leg from the public gaze. "Oh, I see," he said. "Why, delighted, old man, quite delighted. Any small part would do. Isn't there a maid or something in your Bobsworth of refined entertainment who drifts about saying 'Yes, madame,' and all that sort of thing? Well, then, that's just the thing. Topping. I knew I could rely on you, old bird. I'll get Lucille to ship her round to your address when she arrives. I fancy she's due to totter in somewhere in the next few days. Well, I must be popping. Toodaloo." "Pip, pip," said Reggie. It was about a week later that Lucille came into the suite at the Hotel Cosmopolis that was her home, and found Archie lying on the couch, smoking a refreshing pipe after the labours of the day. It seemed to Archie that his wife was not in her usual cheerful frame of mind. He kissed her, and having relieved her of her parasol, endeavoured without success to balance it on his chin. Having picked it up from the floor and placed it on the table, he became aware that Lucille was looking at him in a despondent sort of way. Her grey eyes were clouded. "Hello, old thing," said Archie. "What's up?" Lucille sighed wearily. "Archie, darling, do you know any really good swear words?" "Well," said Archie reflectively, "let me see. I did pick up a few tolerably ripe and breezy expressions out in France. All through my military career there was something about me, some subtle magnetism, don't you know, and that sort of thing, that seemed to make colonels and blighters of that order rather inventive. I sort of inspired them, don't you know. I remember one brass hat addressing me for quite 10 minutes, saying something new all the time, and even then he seemed to think he had only touched the fringe of the subject. As a matter of fact, he said straight out in the most frank and confiding way that mere words couldn't do justice to me. But why? Because I want to relieve my feelings. Anything wrong? Everything's wrong. I've just been having tea with Bill and his Mabel." "Oh, ah," said Archie, interested. "And what's the verdict?" "Guilty," said Lucille. "And the sentence, if I had anything to do with it, would be transportation for life." She peeled off her gloves irritably. "What fools men are! Not you, precious. You're the only man in the world that isn't, it seems to me. You did marry a nice girl, didn't you? You didn't go running round after females with crimson hair, goggling at them with your eyes popping out of your head like a bulldog waiting for a bone. Oh, I say, does old Bill look like that? Worse." Archie rose to a point of order. "But one moment, old lady. You speak of crimson hair. Surely old Bill, in the extremely jolly monologues he used to deliver whenever I didn't see him coming and he got me alone, used to allude to her hair as brown. It isn't brown now. It's bright scarlet. Good gracious, I ought to know. I've been looking at it all the afternoon. It dazzled me. If I've got to meet her again, I mean to go to the oculist's and get a pair of those smoked glasses you wear at Palm Beach." Lucille brooded silently for a while over the tragedy. "I don't want to say anything against her, of course." "No, no, of course not." "But of all the awful second-rate girls I ever met, she's the worst. She has vermilion hair and an imitation Oxford manner. She's so horribly refined that it's dreadful to listen to her. She's a sly, creepy, slinky, made-up, insincere vampire. She's common. She's awful. She's a cat." "You're quite right not to say anything against her," said Archie approvingly. "It begins to look," he went on, "as if the good old pater was about due for another shock. He has a hard life." "If Bill dares to introduce that girl to father, he's taking his life in his hands." "But surely that was the idea, the scheme, the wheeze, wasn't it? Or do you think there's any chance of his weakening?" "Weakening? You should have seen him looking at her. It was like a small boy flattening his nose against the window of a candy store." "Bit thick." Lucille kicked the leg of the table. "And to think," she said, "that when I was a little girl I used to look up to Bill as a monument of wisdom. I used to hug his knees and gaze into his face and wonder how anyone could be so magnificent." She gave the offending table another kick. "If I could have looked into the future," she said, with feeling, "I'd have bitten him in the ankle." In the days which followed, Archie found himself a little out of touch with Bill and his romance. Lucille referred to the matter only when he brought the subject up, and made it plain that the topic of her future sister-in-law was not one which she enjoyed discussing. Mr. Brewster Sr., when Archie, by way of delicately preparing his mind for what was about to befall, asked him if he liked red hair, called him a fool, and told him to go away and bother someone else when they were busy. The only person who could have kept him thoroughly abreast of the trend of affairs was Bill himself, and experience had made Archie wary in the matter of meeting Bill. The position of confidant to a young man in the early stages of love is no sinecure, and it made Archie sleepy even to think of having to talk to his brother-in-law. He sedulously avoided his love-lorn relative, and it was with a sinking feeling one day that, looking over his shoulder as he sat in the Cosmopolis grill-room, preparatory to ordering lunch, he perceived Bill bearing down upon him, obviously resolved upon joining his meal. To his surprise, however, Bill did not instantly embark upon his usual monologue. Indeed, he hardly spoke at all. He champed a chop, and seemed to Archie to avoid his eye. It was not till lunch was over and they were smoking that he unburdened himself. "Archie," he said. "Hello, old thing," said Archie. "Still there? I thought you died or something. Talk about our old pals, Tongue-Tied Thomas and Silent Sammy. You could have beat them both on the same evening." "It's enough to make me silent." "What is?" Bill had relapsed into a sort of waking dream. He sat frowning somberly, lost to the world. Archie, having waited what seemed to him a sufficient length of time for an answer to his question, bent forward and touched his brother-in-law's hand gently with the lighted end of his cigar. Bill came to himself with a howl. "What is?" said Archie. "What is what?" said Bill. "Now listen, old thing," protested Archie. "Life is short and time is flying. Suppose we cut out the cross-talk. You hinted there was something on your mind, something worrying the old bean, and I'm waiting to hear what it is." Bill fiddled a moment with his coffee-spoon. "I'm in an awful hole," he said at last. "What's the trouble?" "It's about that darned girl." Archie blinked. "What?" "That darned girl." Archie could scarcely credit his senses. He had been prepared, indeed he had steeled himself, to hear Bill allude to his affinity in a number of ways. But that darned girl was not one of them. "Companion of my riper years," he said, "let's get this thing straight. When you say 'that darned girl,' do you by any possibility allude to—" "Of course I do." "But, William, old bird—" "Oh, I know, said Bill irritably. "You're surprised to hear me talk like that about her." "A trifle, yes. Possibly a trifle. When last heard from, laddie, you must recollect you were speaking of the lady as your soul-mate, and at least once, if I remember rightly, you alluded to her as your dusky-haired lamb." A sharp howl escaped Bill.